Welcome back to our Bloomberg Focus. I am Mary Burt Godwin, and I have a friend of the show here, Steve Brady. He's back, the CEO of Tempest Therapeutics, joining us today again.
Thank you for having me.
I loved our last chat, so I'm glad to have some more time to drill down and hear what's new with Tempest Therapeutics. First, your ticker symbol TPST, and so you're a clinical stage oncology company,
yes,
Tempest Therapeutics, and I know liver cancer is the primary type of cancer that this main drug that you're focusing on. So TPST 1120 now has a new name.
Yes, it does. Amezalpat.
I was going to try to say it, but I'm glad you said it first. Amezalpat.
Should be easier to say than a lot of the names out there.
Amezalpat. Amazing Amezalpat is what we're going to call it. Okay. So last time I believe I spoke with you, we were in phase 2, or you were in phase 2. And so where are we now and what's been going on?
Right. So technically, we're still in phase 2 because even though we released the data that were received really well, as a reminder, we did what you consider a gold standard, right? A randomized study. We took our drug, combined it with the standard of care, and we compared it to the standard of care. And the reason everyone was so excited was because it beat it soundly in every category and didn't add much toxicity at all, which is, again, is always one of the goals, right?
Yes.
If you want to move the needle for cancer patients, you want them to live longer and actually have a quality of life. So adding on a whole bunch of toxicity doesn't make sense. So that's the phase 2 portion of the development of Amezalpat in liver cancer, because you made an important point. That's the focus, but that's not the only place this drug could go. So where we are now, and this is very important in drug development, so we took those data and we went to the FDA. Which
is a scary thing to do, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's like the, oh my gosh, what's going to happen?
It is, because you get together and with a whole bunch of people who have done this for many years, have developed, tried to develop multiple drugs or been successful in some cases, and you think, I'm going to go forward with something. This makes a ton of sense. I think the FDA will agree with me, and I think the Europeans will agree with me, and I think the Japanese, because remember, this is global.
Right.
We have to take what we're doing with the FDA and go around the whole world with this. But the FDA is your big initial mountain to climb. And I have to say, just to be fair to them, because the government always gets a lot of grief, I worked in oncology most of my career. The oncology division of the FDA have been great overall because we have the same goal, right? We're trying to get drugs to patients that balance benefit and risk, right?
Yes.
So we went to them with a proposal, and it was scary, and it was a wonderful set of conversations, very constructive. Granted, we didn't go in with anything crazy. We went in with what you call the gold standard of getting a drug approved, which is overall survival. That's going to be our endpoint. We went in with saying, hey, we're going to take this, add it on to standard of care and compare it to standard of care, basically taking our phase 2 and enlarging it, making it bigger so you can get all the math, right? You need statistical significance to win. That is one of the most rational ways to develop a drug. We didn't ask for shortcuts. The only thing we asked for could end up shortening things significantly in a phase 3 is we said, look, if this does really well, and we hit what you could call early efficacy, that is where we look earlier than the end, and you say this is working, can we end earlier? Can we file to get drug approval? And they agreed.
This might be way too in the weeds, but how long does that take, that process of you present it to the FDA and like an actual presentation in a boardroom or something, and then they think about it and assess the information? How long does that take?
Absolutely. So it's funny because I don't get that question very often. It's a process that takes months. We put together what's called a briefing. We ask for a meeting. They say yes or no. They can say no. They can say do Zoom.
They can? Wow.
Yeah, and they could say, let's just do, we don't need an in-person meeting. We can do this, or let's do Zoom. They actually said, feel free to come to the East Coast. We'll meet in person. We submitted then what's called a briefing document, which is, in our case, was close to a 100-page document with all of our arguments. This is why we think this is good for patients. This is why we hope you agree with us. And our initial reaction back from them was, largely, we agree with everything. Great. There's a few more things we want to talk about. We said, okay, we flipped it into a Zoom meeting because we said, we're not going to fly to the East Coast if we're and then the last meeting was great. And then they give you what are called minutes. And that's what you live by, your meeting minutes. And it's another big document that says, these are the things we discussed.
I mean, I don't know why that's fascinating to me, but I just, the process of getting it, because it's rigorous, and it's rigorous,
and they're being careful. Yeah, they're being careful, and they should be. Their job is not to let things get out into the market and get to patients that weren't carefully thought through. And we should want them to do that.
Right. And then it probably makes you think about things you didn't think about before.
Absolutely.
With just under 1 million deaths a year globally, the threat of liver cancer creeps up on us every day. A disease that thrives off obesity and alcohol consumption, finding itself a home in a society made of fast food and alcohol ads. It's causing a storm that together we must be prepared for. However, it's not just the disease we need to be wary about. The cure can be just as sinister and brutal. What about the quality of the patient's life too? How much suffering is extra time worth? Join us as we find out, what is this disease? How are we treating it now? And most importantly, who is doing something to make it better?
I think obviously we need to improve the survival, but we also need to improve quality of life.
Tell your immune system to be able to identify the cells that it should have been killing.
This is the story of your liver's fight for survival. Liver cancer. It's a silent storm, often building unnoticed until it strikes. In part 1 of this series, we explored the growing threat, how this disease has become more prevalent, and why the numbers continue to rise.
So, I think it's really driven by more obesity and more alcohol. It takes a long time to get liver cancer. We're just starting to see a spike in liver cancer from the Great Recession, like 2007. So you can imagine people started drinking more during the pandemic. I can't even imagine what my clinic is going to look like in 10 years.
Many Americans apparently drinking their way through quarantine. It's easy to chuckle about that, but it's not funny.
We looked at the science, the risks, and the harsh reality of what liver cancer does to the body.
Each year, there are almost 1 million new patients diagnosed with liver cancer. And prognosis isn't great. The reason why is because people usually show up to the doctor's office and they already have pretty advanced disease. The overall survival rate is low. So the 5-year survival rate is less than 20%, which means then less than 20% of people who get liver cancer are going to live beyond 5 years.
Worldwide, there's more than 700,000 people that die per year. And in the United States, liver cancer ranks among the top 10 killers, both in men and in women, although we know that men are more commonly affected than women. Roughly a little bit less than 50,000 people die in the United States every year from liver cancer.
For every number you hear in a statistic, there is a person behind the number. A mother, father, son, daughter, a neighbor, a friend. If the survival rate wasn't enough of a concern, the path to recovery from the disease is just as arduous. The cost of health for a patient is often very high and painful. Our team set out across the country to find individuals who have faced this battle, to learn more from their stories, so we can get a clearer picture of what this dark cloud society faces actually looks like. These stories will guide us along our path as we run into the unlikely heroes at the forefront of this fight and help lead us to the possible solutions on the horizon.
My mother just got diagnosed with HCC. She has numerous tumors. The largest is 1.8 centimeters in her liver. The doc said chemo is the option as the tumors are close to the portal vein. I don't know if chemo will be helpful. My mother's feeling so much pain in her right side of the abdomen, I can't see her in the shape.
I just found out my dad was diagnosed with HCC. The tumor is 7.5 centimeters, and there are multiple smaller mets inside his liver. I don't know what it all means. His first appointment is tomorrow at the cancer center, but his scans were done on May 2nd, so I'm worried it'll spread more. They're doing a chest CT too. I just found out yesterday. My head's spinning.
I went outside and just stood outside under the moon and just looked up at the stars and in the heaven and wondered how much more I could tolerate. Wondering how far I was going to get and feeling like this might be the end and really feeling not sorry for myself, but sorry for my family and then also sorry for all my students that I was still in relationship with, my community at large. So that night under the stars, I did just lay down in the field in my bathrobe, cried really hard and said goodbye to the world.
These are the patients.
My name's Karen Hoyt, and I was diagnosed with hepatocellular carcinoma in June of 2014. In 2010, I was diagnosed with a liver failure. I had an emergency room situation where I was cycling one day, and the next day my liver failed, and I turned yellow and blew up overnight. Liver disease can be a silent killer, and we had no idea that my liver was failing until my organs began to shut down. So I had to have blood transfusions. It was just an enormous mass rush to save my life. And it was a pretty cruel blow to find out that then, even after I got stabilized, I would have to continue to be surveillanced or continue to be monitored for the rest of my life for liver cancer.
Cancer is very impactful on people's lives. We were talking earlier about the fact that there's nobody who hasn't been impacted in their life by cancer, whether it be a family member, a loved one, a friend. It touches everybody. It's a very frightening disease that in general people don't understand. They don't know really what cancer is, and it's because it's super complicated. Cancer is not one disease, it's a multitude of different diseases that are biologically distinct. Anybody can get it. Doctors get cancer, healthy people get cancer, unhealthy people get cancer. It strikes everybody.
So I had surveillance done every 6 months, just like my doctor ordered. I stayed in compliance with everything they asked me to do, and that included getting an alpha-fetoprotein marker, which is just for the type of cancer that I got. And I also had ultrasounds done every 6 months. And during one of my visits, a routine visit, my liver had popped a tumor.
Hi, my name is Jason Crutchley. I was diagnosed at birth with atrial septal defect, transposition of the great vessels, subaortic stenosis, and pulmonary atresia. Basically, I was born with one chamber of my heart instead of four. I had the Fontan procedure. One of the downfalls of the Fontan is the increased pressures throughout the body. Those increased pressures gave me cirrhosis of the liver and also gave me hepatocellular carcinoma.
About 80% of these cancers arise in the context of underlying liver disease and chronic inflammation, which makes it way more difficult because you actually have a cancer that arises in an already diseased organ.
I was actually being worked up for a transplant in 2017, and in 2018 I had gotten up in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep, had insomnia, decided I'll read through my medical chart just to see what the doctors had written, kind of curious, and so I'm reading through it, and I saw a few things, and all of a sudden I'm reading hepatocellular carcinoma, and I went, wait, what? I know what carcinoma is. What is hepatocellular carcinoma? And it was 3 o'clock in the morning. It was in November, if I recall, of 2018, and I'm like freaking out. What is this? And so the next morning they called me up and said, oh, you didn't know?
My name is Florinda Gray Davis, and I was diagnosed with end-stage liver disease in April of 2017. I was diagnosed with inoperable liver cancer in August of 2017.
Cancers like to hide from the immune system. The immune system is constantly trying to fight cancer. Cancer is always hiding from the immune system. And one of the ways that the cancer hides from the immune system is it puts up these blocks on the immune system. The most important molecule that has been identified to date is PD-L1. PD-L1 on a cancer cell binds to PD-1 on a T cell. That's the immune cell that attacks the cancer. And it's basically a don't attack me signal. So it actually turns off the immune system.
I was running a high fever. 104 for an adult is not a good thing. And I remember being thrown back on the bed, doctors around me, really don't remember much, but I woke up in ICU. And this doctor comes in and he says, Miss Gray Davis, you have inoperable liver cancer and you need a liver transplant or you're gonna die. And turns around and walks out. And I look at my aunt and I'm like, what did he say? I said, what did he say? Go get him. And so she goes and gets the doctor, and the doctor comes back in, and I said, "What did you say?" And he said, "You have inoperable liver cancer, and you're going to die if you don't get a liver transplant." That was it. And
Steve Jobs said, "Knowing you're going to die changes everything. If you know you have a limited time, you want to make it meaningful." Mitch Albom from Tuesdays with Morrie said, "When you learn that you're going to die, you start living differently." But it was Seneca who said it best. Sometimes, even to live is an act of courage.
Well, most of the time, if you have liver cancer, you're an end-stage liver disease, your liver's not functioning properly. So the medicine they're giving you to kill the cancer is actually affecting you, and your liver can't process it. And so you're lucky to manage the symptoms and manage the progress.
As a runner, I told the doctors that I was pulling my ID, and I ran out of the hospital. And I said, "If you can beat me to my car, you can keep him."
For Lorinda, Karen, Jason, and many others, fighting through liver cancer will be one of the biggest acts of courage in their lives. For these three, good fortune and excellent medical efforts saw them through and provided them with new livers and a second fighting chance at life. Yet even they had to face down the barrel of the unforgiving treatments that are needed to fight such an unforgiving disease.
Needing to add chemo or radiation that I knew would make me feel worse than I already did, that was frightening.
This is the treatment.
January 2023. I started a daily chemo pill. It messed me up bad. Physically, mentally, cognitively. I couldn't walk without a walker. I could barely swallow, couldn't eat. When I started hallucinating, my family called my oncologist's office, and I was told to stop the medication immediately, which I did. My oncologist says there is one more daily pill we can try, but it's an older medication considered a first-generation med. We are giving my body this week to heal. Then we'll try the other pill. If this doesn't work, I'm out of options as far as treatment. I thought we would move to palliative care to make me as comfortable as possible, which I am actually fine with. I would rather live a shorter amount of time, but feel pretty good, than live a longer time and be physically impaired and doped up.
So my treatment with the taste procedure, you know, I remember the doctor looking at the MRI and then discussing with us, you know, this could happen, you know, we may not get the tumor. And I remember just the anxiety of it and not believing that it really was going to work, because I didn't know anyone that had liver cancer.
A TACE procedure, or transarterial chemoembolization, is a treatment that delivers chemotherapy directly to a liver tumor.
There's a treatment which is called intraarterial chemoembolization. So the interventional radiologist will actually go with a catheter straight into the hepatic artery that feeds these tumors and deliver microparticles so that you can selectively treat this tumor and deliver chemotherapy. The idea of this treatment is to shrink the tumor and extend the patient's survival. And in some cases, you know, with these treatments, even if the patient has a tumor that is not resectable or not curable in the beginning, if you actually achieve a significant amount of shrinkage, you may actually be able to resect and cure the patient at a later time.
The treatment, it was the fact that they could actually get to the tumor was amazing, but afterwards I was sick. I had to stay longer in the hospital just because of my reaction to whatever they had done. It was just the fatigue of having it done, and the end-stage liver disease on top of that is horrible. And just the symptoms of diarrhea, the symptoms of just trying to make it to the bathroom, the nausea. I wish that on no one. At some point they said, let's go ahead and start with the transplant testing. And so all of it was just pending on MRI scans to make sure that tumor wasn't growing, and if it was, to have to go back in and actually do the procedure again. So one of my coping mechanisms, I can tell you that I would talk to my sister-in-law, and there was a lot of times that she would just sit with me when I cried because I couldn't do it anymore. I felt like there was just it was never going to happen. And then I started listening to fight songs, and so I found one. And it's Rachel Platten, and I always feel stupid because I always say,
well, what song is it? I said, it's called my fight song. So, this is my fight song, Take Back My Life song, Prove I'm All Right song. That was, for me, I had to listen to it over and over again because I had to get out of my head and be willing to fight through this.
This is my fight song, take back my life song, prove I'm all right
song. Everyone needs a fight song indeed. Battling with liver cancer is no small fight, and battling the symptoms of the treatment, well, that's another war entirely.
I was really fortunate to have a really good cancer team. So the tumor board made a lot of decisions and offered those to me. I had a family member that was able to drag me down for those meetings, and they explained which type of procedures that they might use. Irradiation oncologists met with me. And then after I was diagnosed with cancer, I kind of felt like there was almost like a thin veil that fell and separated my life. So behind the curtain, you could see that Karen was still Karen. Karen was still a fighter. Karen wasn't going to give up easily. Karen had a plan. She was setting goals. But then behind the veil was a very distraught, anxiety-filled, dark, very frightened person who didn't know from day to day what was going to happen with their body. I could suddenly go into a failure again. And then once the cancer treatment started, you really began to deal with your mortality in a new way. I spent a lot of hours on the couch, just lying on my back, thinking about the end of my life and had I accomplished everything I wanted to. I began to look at all the avenues that we have as humans. So I looked at the spiritual, the mental, and the physical part, and I was challenging myself. Could I stay alert mentally in spite of the treatment I was going through?
And unmet medical need is an area where we see patients suffering, right? So it's an area of people with a certain disease who aren't getting the kind of care that they need, or the standard of care is okay, but it could be better, right?
I think quality of life with today's immune-based drugs is actually okay. Patients tend generally to feel okay with the drugs.
It is important to note that immunotherapy drugs are also part of the standard of care, but they are far from perfect. Immunotherapy has been a part of liver cancer treatment relatively recently, becoming a standard option for advanced cases around the last decade. Although research in cancer immunotherapy began in the 1990s, it wasn't until 2017 that checkpoint inhibitors such as Opdivo and Keytruda were approved for use in advanced liver cancer. The treatment landscape further evolved with the 2020 approval of the combination of Tecentriq and Avastin, which became a first-line therapy for advanced hepatocellular carcinoma, HCC. The combination of the drugs brought a double-pronged attack into the arsenal against liver cancer, with Avastin preventing the formation of new blood vessels that tumors need to grow and spread, and Tecentriq reactivating the immune response by helping immune cells recognize and target the cancer.
What we do when we talk about immunotherapy is we take this idea again and reactivate these T cells, make these T cells functional again, so we give drugs that the T cells become highly active and do what they're supposed to do and kill the tumor cell again.
The problem is that the drugs work in only a third of patients, and when those drugs stop working, then we're left with the old school type of drugs like the sorafenib and other drugs in that category. Those drugs are much harder to tolerate. They cause skin changes on the hands and feet, diarrhea, nausea, fatigue. Fatigue is common with our current drugs also. So I think obviously we need to improve the survival, but we also need to improve quality of life.
I was malnourished because I was so nauseated that I couldn't eat. And sometimes even if I did manage to hold down a cracker, it would pretty much go straight through me. I was often concerned about vomiting blood and having bloody diarrhea because I had extreme varices. Some of these are the uglier details that no one likes to talk about, but not just the loss of dignity and the loss of vanity, but every one of those symptoms also points to something here is dying. And it's me, it's my body. And the pain and the muscular aches and the joints and the swelling and all of the aches in our bodies, we know that those are signals of death. And we just feel it creeping in and coming in the door. My darkest day, I would say, was probably in the night. Often pain wakes you up in the night. So I got up in the night and I was sick. And then I couldn't go back to sleep. I didn't want to wake my husband up by slipping back into bed. I tried the couch, but the pain was too great. And so I went outside and just stood outside under the moon and just looked up at the stars and in the heaven and wondered how much more I could tolerate. Wondering how far I was going to get and feeling like this might be the end. So that night under the stars, I did just lay down in the field in my bathrobe, cried really hard and said goodbye to the world.
Well, the mental is very difficult because, just a diagnosis, is obviously, that hits you, Nobody is planning, scheduled, to get this disease and this diagnosis.
Every illness is experienced by people, and it's almost always unexpected, right? That we see ourselves in a unique light where it's not going to happen to us until it does, and then it's a shock, and then it's scary, and all of those things. So,
I think it's important, that at that time, you build your kind of help system and friends and family or something, that you go through this. But then I see, a lot of patients who really starts thinking, okay, so now I have to deal with this and I have to make the best out of it.
And I was like, okay, and again, I just let it go, because it's why worry about something that you have no control of. So we didn't do anything about it. 3 months later, I got the call for my transplant, and went in, had my transplant, and then when they actually biopsied my liver, they discovered that it had grown to 2.4 centimeters. So had I not gotten the call, I wouldn't have, I don't know what would have happened. I mean, my guess is they would have taken me off the transplant list, because they were going to have to start doing, different procedures, whether it was, like I said, chemo or radiation. I was fortunate enough to have gotten the phone call that they had a heart and liver available for me. To me, it's still such a shock for me to go, I had cancer, but I didn't, I feel guilty many times by saying that, yeah, I'm a cancer survivor. Because the reality is, I didn't go through any of the radiation. I didn't go through any chemo. I didn't go through any treatments that were required normally for cancer. First you have to understand, I'm already fighting for my life. Literally, I was on 4 liters of oxygen. I could not bend over, tie my shoes, put on socks, couldn't do dishes. Needing to add chemo or radiation that I knew would make me feel worse than I already did, that was frightening. And that's what saved my life. In many ways, it saved my life, obviously because of what it was, but also it saved my life because I didn't have to go through all those procedures because I got the call. So I was fortunate.
One can't help but wonder, what if Jason had never gotten that lucky call? What other options are out there for people like him to survive? What about Lorinda and Karen as well? Is this the price one must pay to live? We asked the same question and sought out the experts once more, starting with a company focused not only on improving the rate of survival for liver cancer, but increasing the quality of life for patients as well. Tempest Therapeutics. This is the future.
I think right now the standard of care for people with liver cancer, is working okay. There's a reason why it's a standard of care, but we can always do better.
I think obviously we need to improve the survival, but we also need to improve quality of life.
And based on our phase 2 data, we're doing much better than the standard of care.
So there's 2 ways broadly to think about how you fight cancer. One is you go after something on the cancer itself, right? It's called targeted therapies. Those cancer cells and all those are cells in your body that have gone ballistic, right? And are dividing in a way that is not appropriate. There are these molecular targets on them. They express something that you can identify, and you create a molecule to literally go there, hit that target, and make that cancer cell die. So that's one approach. The other one, and again, these are rough categories, is your immune system is fighting cancer all the time, right? Cancer cells are usually recognized by your body as not self. I should go after this. I should take this cell out, right? It's not normal cellular functioning, except when it's no longer doing that. And so suddenly cells, we say that they learn how to hide. They don't have intelligence, right? When they reproduce inappropriately, something happens in that the immune system no longer sees them, right? And that is one of the holy grails of cancer, is getting your immune system to recognize those cells again and go after it. The lead program, TPST-1120, we think is actually doing both.
Like the immunotherapy drugs we discussed earlier, Tempest Therapeutics approaches the problem with a similar mindset: enable the body to fight cancer better, help stack the odds in your favor, so to speak. Unlike the other drugs though, Tempest has a novel approach, denying cancer its food supply.
The Tempest drug, TPST-1120, so I was fortunate enough to be the lead investigator of their trial. This is a completely new class of drug. Anti-PD-1 has become this common denominator of what we're using for patients, but unfortunately, a lot of patients don't respond to anti-PD-1. So there's been a lot of research from many centers trying to understand how do we get these PD-1 drugs to work better. TPST-1120 is a new class of drugs that blocks something called PPAR-alpha.
So 1120 is an inhibitor of an enzyme called PPAR-alpha. And PPAR-alpha directs metabolism for cells, right? It turns on genes that allow cells to use fats as an energy source. And it turns out that cancer cells are actually really good at doing this.
So for 1120, it's called PPAR-alpha, right? But there's alpha, there's beta, there's gamma, there's all these versions of PPAR-alpha. We designed a molecule that goes specifically for PPAR-alpha.
The process of increasing fatty acid oxidation not only helps liver cancer cells grow fast, but that pathway also leads to suppression of some immune cells, particularly macrophages. And so the thought is, if you can block this pathway, you actually may get a 2-for-1. You may actually control tumor growth directly by starving the cancer of an energy source, but you may also sort of reverse this immune exhaustion that happens because of the abnormal metabolism in the tumor. So it's a 2-for-1 idea.
So it turns off the energy source for cancer cells that use fat as an energy source.
And why do you care about specificity? Is because you don't want it to do anything in your body than what you want it to do. That's where toxicity comes in. That's where bad side effects come into people. And so the beautiful thing about PPAR-alpha is that it's expressed on both tumor cells and on immune cells. And so what our goal was with this program was to hit cancer cells directly, but also ignite the immune system, turn it back on and say, recognize you have malignant cells right here, go after them.
You see, by targeting PPAR-alpha, Tempest has successfully not only disrupted the cancer's food supply, but also your immune systems as well, therefore sparking its attention to the otherwise camouflaged invader lurking in your liver. They have harnessed and exploited one of nature's most simple principles. Everyone's got to eat, even cancer cells. But just how effective is this immunometabolism approach? And what does the data say?
So Roche has a regimen of 2 drugs that go together that are a standard treatment. They're actually probably the most popular and most utilized treatment in advanced liver cancer patients. So Roche makes both of these drugs, put them together. They're a great regimen for liver cancer. They're not good enough because it doesn't cure people in general, and even survival is not nearly long enough with any of the standard therapies. But they're still good medicines.
And so they actually studied the triplet. Does the 3-drug combination, adding in 1120, do better than the 2-drug combo? And there have been press releases that at least the number of responders is higher to the triplet than the doublet.
So our phase 2 was operationalized by Roche. So they said, we'll run your 1120 in combination with the standard of care, which is Atezo and Bev. And it turns out that the response rate for the 1120 arm was almost double of that of the atezo-bev control arm. Given the fact that we almost double the response rate, that means that we will double the number of patients that survive and increase both of those numbers.
One key measure in cancer trials is the objective response rate, which indicates the percentage of patients whose tumors shrink significantly. For standard treatments, the objective response rate was 13% after 9 months. However, when TPST-1120 was added, this response rate increased to 30%.
And then in this randomized setting, the arm that had our drug did better than the arm that had the standard of care in a number of characteristics that are important to cancer patients. How long patients lived was better, whether the tumor shrank or didn't shrink on treatment, how long it took before the cancer grew. So cancer will, with many therapies, will be controlled for a period of time and then it'll start to grow. And that's a measurement that we look at because it's important, is, well, how long was the cancer controlled before it started to grow? Because the longer it's controlled, usually the longer people live, but also the better they feel, and the longer they have where the cancer is not impacting their life as much.
And just the symptoms of diarrhea, the symptoms of just trying to make it to the bathroom.
Vomiting blood and having bloody diarrhea because I had extreme varices, the nausea. Some of these are the uglier details that no one likes to talk about. I wish that on no one.
The things that patients think about and worry about: hair loss, nausea, vomiting, severe diarrhea, profound fatigue that prevents people from even having energy to get out of bed. Those symptoms are not associated with Amezalpat, and that's been to the extent that we've with the studies that we've done and the patients we've treated. I think that'll play out even in the next series of studies and even in larger number of patients. And I think it goes back to the mechanism of the drug and what it's actually doing inside of people.
This targeted approach provides hope that TPST-1120 can deliver tailored, effective treatments for individuals facing liver cancer. And the applications may not just end with liver cancer.
It turns out that this enzyme, PPAR-alpha, that's really highly expressed in liver cancers, is also expressed in other cancers, specifically metabolic cancers, so cholangiocarcinoma, and renal cell carcinoma. So opportunities there.
With drugs like Tempest on the horizon, there is hope for those suffering from liver cancer and those who are diagnosed in the future. While the new treatment is still under a late-stage clinical trial, it's marked a new front in the war against cancer. But what do our patients have to say about all of this?
I get hope for cancer treatment. With the new research being done all the time, I'm just hoping for treatments that are more widely available to everyone. And I'm hoping that the researchers continue to plug away and design the tools that will give every patient the option. And so that along with preventive measures, that they're able to find the treatment that they need in time.
I would like to see just newer treatments in general. I mean, we need new treatments and drugs. And it's so important for patients, and not to have those options. It hurts people, and patients end up not surviving because they're not getting access to what they need.
While hope is out there, a need for new treatment is clear. While those needs are being filled by heroes behind the scenes, what can we as individuals do to reduce our risk of liver cancer?
So number one, get a hepatitis vaccine. We know that hepatitis B vaccine reduces the risk of HCC. The hepatitis C, now we have treatment, so you can treat for hepatitis C. That will eliminate or at least reduce the risk. That's the second point. Third point, I talked about alcohol. Alcohol is a risk factor, so if you use excessive alcohol, that's certainly a risk factor. Not drinking will reduce the risk. Number four, we know that obesity and fatty liver disease is a risk factor, so eliminating this risk factor is another option. And then the last point, for those patients who actually have known liver disease, it's important that they undergo surveillance. So in other words, that they go to their hepatologist or to their doctors, and they will do an ultrasound every 6 and blood test every 6 months to make sure that there is no tumor growing, and in case there is one, that this is actually at an early stage where we can still cure the patient.
Along our journey, we have examined liver cancer from all angles: the treatments, the patients, the doctors, and the researchers. We clearly see a need for newer and better treatments, and have clearly seen great efforts to see those needs met. It is a hard fight still ahead, but a worthy one, for the cost of doing nothing is far too high.
Like, it's part of what determines our own self-value, right, is being able to do things, is being able to work, make a living, take care of other people. Cancer can take all that away, and it's a horrible cost. I think a horrible cost that somebody pays.
This has been your liver's fight for survival.
This is my fight song. Take back my life song. Prove I'm alright song. My power's turned up. Starting right now, I'll be strong. I'll play my fight song. And I don't really care if nobody else leaves. 'Cause I've still got a lot of fight left in me. No, I've still got a lot of fight left in me.
And, you know, you mentioned the efficacy of it and the life expectancy, because it is pretty short of someone that is diagnosed with first-line liver cancer.
Unfortunately, yeah, it is.
Months to a year, maybe?
Yeah, it was just months, and then it expanded to over a year, or extended to over a year. There's a thing called a median OS, right? Everybody knows what a median is. So the big therapy, again, Roche has the dominant therapy, right? When they moved the needle a few years ago, when this got approved, they had a median OS of around 19 months.
Oh, wow, okay.
Right, so that was a huge jump.
Yep.
Now there's real world data, what we call real world data, which is when people start looking retrospectively outside of an approval study, that's shorter, right? That's around 14 to 15 months. And in our phase 2, it was shorter. Theirs was 15 months.
Okay.
Ours was 21.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
So 21 months.
It's 6 months more.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
and we've all had lost people to cancer, knowing that you might have 6 months longer is meaningful.
And especially if it is a better quality of life.
Yes,
Less
you're not
toxic.
adding toxicity,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Absolutely.
So what is next for you guys, 6 to 12 months down the line, besides this phase 3?
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing. We're all eyes. I mean, financing dependent. We want to start this and run as fast as we can. We have been talking to what are called KOLs, key opinion leaders, and other HCC physicians from around the world. And our batting average right now, it's wonderful. I haven't had this happen before in my career. Everybody who talks like, I want to be on the study, right? They're excited about it. And so that absolutely is blazing forward. With additional capital, we'd look at kidney cancer. That's another big expressor of the target. Another cancer called cholangiocarcinoma. We have a second program in the clinic that doesn't get nearly as much attention because Amezalpat kind of shadows over everything. It's called TPST 1495.
Okay.
Doesn't have a name yet. That is moving forward in an indication called FAP, which is a pre-colon cancer indication.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that could be a big deal if it could prevent, eventually, the goal would be to prevent colon cancer. And then finally, we're a traditional wet lab research company. All of our programs were invented internally. We have a whole research function that's working on new novel targets.
Wow, I love it. Steve, Brady, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Love having you.
Thank you.
CEO of Tempest Therapeutics, ticker symbol TPST. Why was that a mouthful? Amezalpat is the drug to watch. Thank you for tuning in to our Bloomberg Focus. We'll see you next time.